Okay, good morning. I think we're live. I hope everyone is fantastic today. Hello, good morning, Glasgow Girls Club. How are we today? Hope everyone is fantastic. If you're watching this live, please let me know. Please give me a hashtag live. And if you're watching on the replay, please give me a hashtag replay. My name is Claire Innes, and I am the founder of the Fertility Mentor. I'm a fertility coach, nutritionist, behaviour change, and hormone expert. I have worked exclusively with women for the last 10 years, and over the last 3 years, I've supported thousands of women to improve their fertility and hormone health. And I am frequently called on by the media to explain this stuff because it is complicated and there is a lot of bullshit info out there. So, I'm here monthly. I am the resident fertility expert here in these here parts. And today, in honour of PCOS Awareness Month, I want to give you a clear evidence-based breakdown of PCOS and fertility. Okay, so the different types, how PCOS actually affects fertility, what truly helps hormone balance, and what to be cautious about, including popular medicines like Ozempic. So no gimmicks here, no Instagram bullshit, just facts, practical steps. And if you've got questions, as always, just pop them in the comments and we will chat along as we go. Okay, so please let me know if you can hear me because I'm not sure if you can. Okay, let's just get stuck in. Okay, so what is PCOS? The types of PCOS, sometimes referred to as PCOS. Okay, so global estimates vary with diagnostic criteria, but the World Health Organization in recent meta-analysis put prevalence somewhere around 6 to 13% of women of reproductive age. And we know that many cases go undiagnosed. So this is common and it's often missed. Okay? So it isn't one single thing. Clinically, there's 4 different phenotypes, and that's basically just types of PCOS. The common breakdown looks something like this in most clinical studies. So we've got phenotype A, which is classic PCOS, and this is characterized as hyperandrogenism, so basically elevated levels of male sex hormones, plus ovulatory dysfunction, plus polycystic ovaries, and this is the most common phenotype. Okay, this is estimated to affect 60 to 68% of women who have PCOS, and these women tend to have the strongest metabolic and reproductive symptoms. We then have phenotypes B, C, and D, and they have a mix between the rest of them. So phenotype B is 10%, C is 17 to 18%, and then D, where it's basically just the ovulatory dysfunction and the polycystic ovaries, but without the clinical hyperandrogenism. Okay, so when I'm talking about this, I'm mostly going to be referring to type A, which is classic PCOS, and that affects almost 70% of women who have PCOS. Now, the reason this matters is that the phenotype predicts the risk and the response. So phenotype A often has more metabolic issues, as we know, like insulin resistance, weight issues, and higher androgen levels. And that often needs a combined metabolic and reproductive approach. Whereas phenotype C might look more like PCOS on an ultrasound, but with fewer actual symptoms and metabolic issues. So that's why we always treat the person, not the label. Okay, it's the person, not the label. There is no one size fits all solution. Okay, so in plain language, how does PCOS affect fertility? So the short version of what's happening is we have ovulation disruption. Okay, so the most direct fertility issue. PCOS can often cause irregular and absent ovulation, and that's where no egg is released. And if there's no egg released, we know there's no chance of a natural conception. The other issue is that there's often hormone signaling issues. Okay, so the brain ovary communication, and that's our luteinizing hormone with our FSH balance, basically disrupts the ovarian environment, and this interferes with the follicle development and the egg maturation. Next, we have insulin resistance, which you've probably heard of before. And this is a big driver for many women with PCOS. So this is when the tissues are resistant to insulin, the pancreas pumps out more, the high insulin stimulates the ovary to make more androgens like testosterone and others. This lowers the SHBG, which is the sex hormone binding globulin, and that increases the free circulating androgens. Basically, it's a combination of undesirable situations, undesirable effects, and that disrupts normal ovarian function, and it can actually stop ovulation. Next, we have also cycle unpredictability. So a lot of women with PCOS can't just time intercourse, assume that their fertile window is on day 14 or the days before it. Women with PCOS might have 100-day cycles. They might have very irregular cycles. So that means that it's very difficult for them to know when they're ovulating or even if they're ovulating. So a lot of the work is about lowering insulin exposure to tissues, normalizing those androgen levels and the hormone balance so that we can restore regular ovulation. And this is where things like lifestyle and targeted interventions come in. Okay, so again, I'm just a wee bit stressed that there's no comments here, and I just want to check that you can in fact hear me. So bear with me for one moment just while I check on my phone if this is actually broadcasting live and if you can hear me. Okay, happy days. You can hear me. Sorry about that, everyone. You would not believe the amount of times I have been sat twittering away for up to half an hour thinking people can hear me and then they can't. So that's why I'm a little bit paranoid about that. Okay. So next we're going to talk about the evidence-backed toolbox. What actually works for PCOS and why? Now, for each of these areas, I'm just kind of referring to my notes here, I'm going to list what to do and how that affects the hormones and metabolism, and then practical tips. So number one is, and it's always going to be for PCOS, nutrition and blood sugar control. Okay? This means focus on regular meals with protein and fiber and healthy fats, prioritizing low glycemic and carbohydrate quality over arbitrary restriction. We should be avoiding refined sugars and processed carbs, including those lovely whole grains, legumes, vegetables, and high quality proteins. We want consistent meal timing, and we want to avoid, like the plague, extreme diets unless they are medically supervised. What that's going to do is improve blood sugar stability and reduce those insulin spikes. So if you think about waking up in the morning and having 2 slices of toast without a protein, without any fiber, without those healthy fats, you're just going to get this big spike and then this big dip. Okay, and that is not a good environment. So lower circulating insulin means less ovarian androgen production and higher SHBG. Both of these reduce free testosterone and help to restore normal follicle development and ovulation. Over time, this is not an overnight fix, but over time, improved insulin sensitivity also improves energy, mood, and it can also lower visceral fat, which is an inflammatory driver. So how do I actually do this? Start with a protein breakfast. Add in non-starchy veg to every meal, every single meal, not just the odd meal. Swap out our refined carbs like white bread and Haribos and crisps for whole food sources, okay? And practice this portion awareness. So rather than saying, I'm cutting out carbs, I'm going on Atkins, I'm going on keto, just make sure every meal is covering each food group, okay? Also, where possible, target your carbohydrate intake around activity. So if you know you're having a workout, have carbs just before the workout, just after the workout, but don't avoid carbs at sedentary stretches, but have fewer when you're sitting on your bum. Okay? In practice, modest, sustainable changes are what we want, not extreme diets. We want modest, we want things that we can do for longer term. We want to make these changes slowly and sustainably over time. Now, I can't talk about PCOS without talking about resistance training. Many moons ago, I used to be a pre and postnatal personal trainer. I love my resistance training, but it is so, so, so helpful and so relevant in PCOS. So you really want to be training with weights or with resistance 2 to 4 times a week, as well as daily low-level movement like walking or active recovery. What we want to avoid is chronic, excessively intense training. So things like long HIIT classes, things where it's on, off, on, off, on, off. Okay. Resistance training is going to increase muscle mass. That improves glucose uptake and insulin sensitivity, and improved insulin handling reduces our insulin-driven androgen production. Exercise can also increase our metabolic flexibility and help weight management. Okay, so this isn't relevant to everyone, but it is relevant to a lot of women who are dealing with PCOS. So the practical tips I'm going to give you here are: have short, progressive resistance training sessions with weights if you can. Maybe it's joining a gym, maybe it's using your body weight, maybe it's buying a couple of dumbbells or a kettlebell off of Gumtree. But focus on the major muscle groups. Even 2 full body sessions a week can make a big, big difference. So I can't talk about PCOS without talking about exercise. Sorry about that. Okay, so next, number 3, we'll move on to sleep and stress management. You should be aiming for a consistent 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. And if you're struggling with that, think about what you can do to get there. Use things like sleep hygiene, a dark room, a wind down routine, a lovely lavender spray for your pillow, and use stress reduction practices. So things like, if it's relevant to you, breathing, short meditations, things like that. And the reason this is so helpful and so relevant is that chronic stress elevates cortisol. This interacts with insulin and reproductive hormones, and it can blunt our ovulatory signals. So lowering stress, improving sleep, improves that regulation, reduces inflammation, and that's going to create a more favourable environment for ovulation and reproductive timings. So in terms of practical tips, during the week, just have a very normal, a consistent wind down routine. Avoid screens 30 to 60 minutes before you want to be sleeping. Keep your bedroom nice and cool. Keep it nice and dark. Have a process. Treat yourself like that baby that you want to have. Have a wind down process so that you're telling all of your senses it's wind down time. We're going to sleep soon. Okay, next I'm going to talk about everyone's favourite subject, evidence-based supplements, okay? No woo-woo, no magical herbs, the things that are science-backed, evidence-based. So number 1 for PCOS, which is showing some really, really, really good meta-analysis, is inositol. So this has good evidence for improving insulin sensitivity, ovulation, and even oocyte quality, so egg quality, in some studies. So recent systematic reviews and meta-analysis show that there is benefits for both ovulation and metabolic markers in women with PCOS. Next is vitamin D. We are Glasgow girls. We do not get enough sunlight, and vitamin D deficiency is quite common in women with PCOS. Next, of course, is omega-3s, which are very helpful for inflammation, and they can modestly improve metabolic markers. Now, many of these act on insulin signaling and reducing inflammation, improving your ovarian environment. But Individual needs do vary, okay? So test first, speak to your doctor, do not over supplement, and please avoid like the plague unproven herbs and teas that promise the world, because they don't deliver. Okay. There may be a point where medication or assisted reproduction is needed. Again, your doctor, your GP, your fertility clinic is the best place to start here. If lifestyle changes don't restore ovulation after a sensible period, and when I say sensible period, I mean 3 to 6 months of consistency, there might be a case for starting letrozole. That is a first-line ovulation inducing drug, and it has been shown to be quite effective in PCOS. But again, this is a conversation to have with your doctor. They know your medical history. They can tell you if this is going to be useful for you or not. Okay, the next thing I want to touch on is GPL-1 agonists. Okay, so this is things like Ozempic, Wegovy, semaglutides. I'm going to give you my balanced take on it with the stats and with my opinions as well. So it's tricky, it's headline grabbing. Semaglutides like Ozempic and Wegovy can cause significant weight loss, and they can improve insulin sensitivity in many people. In obesity research with some PCOS cohorts, semaglutide has produced substantial body weight reductions and improvements in insulin resistance and metabolic markers. And some PCOS case studies and small studies show improved insulin sensitivity and metabolic profile when semaglutide is used. However, it is not a blanket recommendation from me at all. It is, in my opinion, especially if you are trying to conceive, it hasn't been studied enough. The long-term effects, we do not know. In fact, the manufacturers themselves advise stopping using these before conception, before trying to conceive. And many doctors actually recommend being on contraception while taking these drugs, because there just isn't enough safety data and pregnancy test data that tell us that this is safe. Actually, some animal studies have shown that there is a risk. So if you are considering Wegovy or similar, please make sure that you do that under your doctor, your own doctor's supervision. Speak to them first. And also, if you are trying to conceive, please avoid or allow yourself time, a good 3 to 4 months after stopping, before you start actually trying to conceive. Okay, so they might be considered for people with severe obesity, where metabolic disease is the dominant issue and where weight loss would meaningfully reduce health risks. But I'm just very, very wary of them in a fertility context, especially since we don't know the long-term effects on egg quality. Please discuss with your GP, someone who understands your fertility and your medical background, and please do not rely on TikTok or headlines. So next, what I'm going to do is give you a run through a real life example of a client that I have worked with. Now, this is going to be anonymized for her privacy. So we're going to call her Sarah. She was 38 and she had classic PCOS. So she had all of the symptoms: irregular cycles, they were 45 to 70 days, elevated fasting insulin on her bloods, and she was carrying excess body fat, particularly around her abdomen, and that can be quite common for women dealing with insulin resistance. She had been struggling to conceive for 18 months and she had tried it all. So the first thing we did was a nutrition reset. Okay, so we replaced those highly processed meals. We're busy women. I'm not judging anyone here, but these highly processed meals that you buy in the supermarket, even, fast food, microwave dinners, they're not good news when it comes to PCOS or fertility. We swapped them out with balanced meals. So, for example, eggs and veggies with whole grain or oats, salads and lean proteins. We heavily reduced refined carbohydrates and sugars. while avoiding, extreme restriction. So there's none of this keto, none of this I'm off carb stuff. We just made swaps. The first thing we did was introduce a breakfast. I am not a fan at all of cutting breakfast, intermittent fasting, whatever you want to call it. If you are insulin resistant, if you have PCOS, in my opinion, unless a doctor has told you to avoid breakfast, I feel like breakfast is the most important meal of the day. It's the first opportunity to get that protein in. And I ask all of my clients, not just my PCOS clients, all of them to have a protein rich breakfast within 1 hour of waking. And I ask them to include fibre with every meal. So if you're not a veg person, that might be berries, because they are still really high in fibre, but they are low on the glycemic index. The result here was fewer blood sugar crashes, more energy, a small appetite reduction, and that allowed for caloric improvement without being hungry all the time. So instead of all of these spikes and reduced ovarian androgen stimulation, the spikes kind of calm down. Obviously, they're still going to happen because that's what needs to happen. That's what our body does. But it was slow increases, slow falls instead of these big, massive jumps and spikes. In month 2, we introduced 2 30 to 40-minute resistance training sessions a week. Basically, body weight and dumbbells, 30-minute walks a day. This increased our lean mass and counted towards our insulin sensitivity improvements. So the muscle uptake of glucose improved baseline. That's helping with that insulin handling. Okay, we gradually moved that to 3 workouts a week. She did eventually join the gym, but it's really not necessary. We don't need to join a gym. We don't need to, pay a personal trainer. There's other ways around this. In fact, most of my clients do their workouts from home. I design their workouts for them based on what they've got, what they like doing, what they don't like doing, and they do it at home and they schedule it in their own time. Next, we worked on sleep and stress. We implemented that wind down routine, a 30-minute walk after work, and short breathing practices daily. I also introduced, and I didn't speak about this when I was talking about supplements, a magnesium supplement at night before bed. And that helped with reducing cortisol-related interference and improved our ability to ovulate. We all, of course, introduced the vitamin D that I was referring to earlier, and the myo-inositol, and our omega-3s. We avoided, like I always say, unnecessary herbs or unproven supplements. So by month 4 to 5, her cycle shortened from 50 to 70 days to 30 to 40 days. She started showing ovulatory signs on her OPKs and her charting. Her fasting insulin decreased on repeat labs, and she lost 8% of her body weight in a sustainable way. By month 7, she conceived naturally. One thing to point out here is I do not encourage my clients to chase quick fixes. We build sustainable habits. We tracked everything we could. Her weight, her photos, her inches, her energy levels, her menstrual cycle. We even tracked her cervical mucus. If we can track it, we will track it. Now, we also worked on mindset, and that's a whole other topic, but it can't be underestimated. We know that willpower is great for getting us started, but it runs out. So it's the mindset work that keeps us showing up for ourselves. Okay, so are you still with me? Do we have any questions? Do we have any comments? I know this has been quite a geeky one, and I have spoke here about PCOS many times before, but I thought it would be really useful just to kind of go into some of the science and share with you why we make these recommendations. So some of the questions I am often asked about PCOS. Can you have PCOS and still have regular cycles? The answer to this is yes, you absolutely can. That's phenotype C, and this is where they have hyperandrogenism and the PCOS morphology, but they have a regular cycle. So please don't believe that if you think you have got PCOS, but you still have a regular cycle, Don't believe anyone that tells you that the two can't exist. It absolutely can exist. Okay, the next question, probably the most common thing I'm asked about with PCOS. Does weight loss cure PCOS? First and foremost, there is no cure for PCOS. PCOS is a syndrome, but modest weight loss for those who are overweight often improves the insulin sensitivity and ovulation for many. It's one effective lever among several. Should I cut out carbs completely? No, absolutely not. Focus on the quality of the carbs you're having. Instead of these fast release ones like sugar, white bread, potatoes, focus on the ones that are going to be slower release, okay? Things that your body needs to work harder to metabolize. So things like our brown rice or whole grains, these are better for us, particularly when it comes to insulin sensitivity. Total elimination, in my opinion, can cause problems with bad breath, flatulence, energy levels, adherence, and it can often lead to binging and ending up back where you start. And truly, I don't think it's necessary. As long as you pair your carbs with the proteins, the veggies, and the healthy fats and have things in moderation, there is absolutely space for carbohydrates in most women with PCOS. Okay, just conscious of time here, my darlings. So this is going to be the last question. What is my first step if I think I have PCOS? The first step if you think you have PCOS is, of course, to speak to your doctor. I would recommend tracking your cycle and your symptoms. Ask your doctor to run basic bloods like your FSH and your LH, testosterone, and your fasting glucose. Start with small, sustainable nutrition and movement changes. And if you are trying to conceive, consider working with a fertility coach like myself, but there are many, many amazing ones out there. So I'm just going to wrap up with the key takeaways here. Okay. Number one, PCOS is common and diverse. There's different types and symptoms vary widely. The important thing is to understand your body and your phenotype. Fertility is absolutely possible with PCOS. PCOS alone does not mean that it is impossible to get pregnant. It often comes down to restoring ovulation, balancing out those hormones through lifestyle, targeted support, and when necessary, medical guidance. And number three, lifestyle and science-backed strategies work. Balanced nutrition, resistance training, sleep, stress management, and targeted supplements, they can all make a very real difference. And the key here is 100% moderation. It's not about chucking everything at it for a week. It's about being sustainable about it, making one change at a time, adopting these habits, letting them stick before we try and do something else. So the last thing I want to say is if you have PCOS and if you're trying to conceive, I would love to invite you to my Baby by 26 free challenge. It's designed to give you a structured, science-backed roadmap to improve your fertility, reset your hormones, and create the best possible environment for conception. This is all with daily guidance, expert tips. I'm going to be delivering a daily masterclass. There's going to be workbooks, recipe books, and of course, the support of the community. Now, this is not just for women with PCOS, it's for any woman who is trying to conceive. Whether you're just starting to understand PCOS, whether you don't have PCOS, maybe you've got endometriosis, maybe you have unexplained infertility, maybe you've been struggling for a while, this challenge is going to give you actionable steps to move forward, and you won't be doing it alone. So you can sign up at my website, which is the Fertility Mentor, and then it's /baby by 26 blueprint, or you can follow my socials, they're everywhere. And it's free sign up. You enter your name, you enter your email address, and that's it. So thank you so much for joining me today. And if you take one thing away from this, please remember PCOS does not need to stand in the way of your family dreams. Take the steps, that are in your control. Control the things you can control and get the right support, and let's just improve your health, improve your happiness. Let's get going. All right, my darlings, I've been Claire Innes, the fertility mentor. If you have any questions about anything we've talked about here, if you agree, if you disagree, if you want to shoot the shit, just pop them in the comments there. Thank you very much, my darlings. Bye.